gentlemen, we'll get started this morning. Just to start this morning's talk, first of all, we have a few apologies. Paddy Carr and Tina, who aren't here. They're, I think, on an 18 to 30 holiday in Lanzarote. Also, another message this month from Noel Brannigan again in Sydney, Australia, who, after listening to last month's talk online, he mentioned about Sister Imelda and the tin cup of warm milk they used to get every morning in infants class up in the convent school. And he also mentioned, a thing I'd sort of forgotten about the last time, serving mass, as we all did, at the 7:30 up in the convent. And a lovely warm chapel as you're waiting. And he remembers going when Father Duffy saying the mass and serving mass. And he thinks this is the greatest thing because he can now show his grandchildren all the places that he grew up in and is having a time. So our best wishes to Noel in Sydney, Australia. This morning, in starting off, I think it's right. Technicalities. This morning's talk is on from the Shambles to Skinner's Alley and beyond. And to those who know the area will know where the Shambles is and know where Skinner's Alley is and all of the people who lived in it. It's what we'll call Lower Main Street. Now, I know myself and Jimmy Livingston had major arguments. He kept claiming that was Upper Main Street because he lived in that end of the town. But the correct grammar, and this is in the English Oxford Grammars, is as you move towards the political capital, you're going up. So in Ireland, if you're going to Dublin, you always go up to Dublin, irrespective of where you are in the country. And when you're coming from Dublin, you're coming down. Okay? Now in Castleblayney, obviously the political capital is the town hall or the market house. So as you're coming up Main Street, you're going towards the market house. So Upper Main Street is the side closest to us and Lower Main Street is the other side. It is a very unusual thing that when you're coming down Henry Street, you're actually going up Henry Street. And when you're going up Henry Street, you're actually going down it. So anyway, this is the Shambles from Skinner's Alley and beyond. This is the aerial photograph taken in the late 1940s. You can actually see the wing of the aeroplane sticking out on the left-hand side here to give you an idea of Lower Main Street, or West Street to give it its proper title. And the town itself, when it was developed, there were three main streets in the town. One, of course, was Mucknow Street, and Mucknow Street was developed as the main road going to the north. And it became, when Castleblayney was built, particularly between, say, 1790 and 1830, Mucknow Street had most businesses in it, because that's where, what's the word they use now, footfall advertisers. It's where the main amount of traffic went, because the traffic would be going through to Armagh and to Lurgan, Lisburn, Belfast, going that direction, and coming into the town. So more shops. Henry Street was developed as Dublin Street, which was the original name for Henry Street. And the idea was that if you're going to Dublin, you went up Henry Street, not up Church Street. But Henry Street never developed. It never became the commercial because it's too steep and it's a difficult street to work in. When you actually look at the number of pubs in the town, we once had 32 pubs in the town and only one of them was in Henry Street, Cusack's, and it was closed by the 1940s, I think, maybe 1950s. So as a measure of the commercial centre of the town, you go to the square, obviously the first one because the market square is there and all the market areas would be in the market square. But Mucknow Street was the main commercial centre, never spreading into Henry Street, but spreading up Main Street, up West Street. So a number of businesses then open up on this side, the eastern side of Main Street. Places like there's Bides there and Gray's and all the shops that were in that end of the town. So the town remained very much on the lake side, down the upper side of the town was the commercial centre of the town, and remained so until 1825, when York Street was built. And York Street, in a way, was a means of bypassing Henry Street. So now as you come from Carrick, Dundalk, Dublin, of course, or indeed local areas like Knockagolas and Broomfield, you're coming down York Street and into the main street at what's now the traffic lights, the centre of the street. And the traffic now is coming into the main street, not down Henry Street. Also, two major roads were built in the early 1800s. The Ballybay Road and the Monaghan Road. That's the Monaghan Road through Aniala and what we now call the Ballybay Road. They were completely new roads and they brought a heavier amount of traffic. So people now coming down York Street could turn left to head off to Ballybay and to head off to Monaghan. And the proper name for West Street or Main Street was Monaghan Street. Except for the little bit that bends round the corner here, Bogues' Corner, that was known as Ballybay Street, because the traffic coming out these streets were heading to Ballybay or to Monaghan. And shops now begin to develop at that end of the town, taking away from the eastern side. The next thing that happened was the railway was built. And of course the railway is at this end of the town. It's now closer to Lower Main Street, and the fact the railway is here brings more shops to Lower Main Street and brings them away from Muckner Street. Obviously, if somebody arrives at a train, have to wait at the station for an hour, they want to run down the town, have a quick pint or do a little bit of shopping, they're not going to run away down to the bottom of Muckner Street. They're going to go to the nearest shops to them, and the nearest shops to them would be at this end of Main Street. And so this end of Main Street now becomes more commercialised, more business premises begin to grow up in it, and the centre of the town is now drifting westward, away from the square, more towards the railway station. The final nail in the coffin, of course, for Muckner Street was the setting up of the border in 1921, because, of course, the Newton-Hamilton Road becomes an unapproved road and can't be used, and very little traffic is going north or south. So all of the traffic coming through Blaney is now heading to Monaghan or to Ballybay or heading in that direction, which gives Lower Main Street the advantage. That's where people are passing by, and business premises you'll see in Muckner Street begin to die off slowly. Then, of course, the Troubles of the 1970s totally wiped it out. And if you look at the town today and look at the business premises, there's far more in Lower Main Street than there is nearly in any other section of the town, because the commercial centre over the last 2 centuries has drifted up in that direction. Now, Lower Main Street, or if you want to call it Lower West Street, I'm going to just keep referring to it as Lower Main Street, is a very, very unusual street. Now, everybody who's walked up and down this street hundreds and thousands of times have noticed this. I presume you have. And what's noticeable is that all of the houses on that side of the street, well, most of them anyway, are 2-storey houses. But most of the houses on the other side of the street are 3-storey houses. And the question is, why are there all these single-storied houses on the left-hand side of the main street, but there's 3-storey houses on the other side? And the answer is very simple. In 1824, a man called James Lowy came to the town. Now, James Lowy, I'm not sure where he came from. I'm not sure if he's related to the Lowys of Clontarf today. But he came to the town as a major businessman. He initially took a small site here in this building, and he was a woolen draper. In other words, he's selling wool, he's selling clothes, and he's a draper, and he's got a nice little business. And then he got a lease of Lord Blaney, which ran to 169 feet, which is well over 50 yards, 50 metres, from here right down past Barney's, you all know what Barney's is, past Barney's, and including the 3 smaller houses just below Skinner's Alley or below Barney's, right? And he built 11 houses all the way down there. Now, if you stop and count the number of windows in this street, okay? Go down to Brendan Hughes is in that one there at the moment. You know Brendan Hughes, the undertaker's shop. Count the number of windows. 1, two. Now the one over the gateway I'm going to leave out. Barney's had two separate houses, that's 3, 4. E.g. here's a 2 more, 5, 6. Mulholland's is 7. There's 2 more here is 9. And there's 2 more here is 11. There were 11 single-storey houses. 1 bay wide, that's 1 room wide, all the way down, and none of them had shops in them originally. Mr. Lowy was renting them out to people, and he was making his money by renting out 11 houses, collecting the rents every week, and could pocket the money. And as well as that, he was a draper, became a big businessman. And as I'll show you in a moment, he also built a tannery in at the backs of the houses, and now was a leather merchant as well as being a woolen draper, and was making plenty of money. And all of the people, particularly labourers, people who didn't have a lot of properties, would now rent a small, when I say it's 1 room wide, it's a 4-room house. There's a room at the front, a kitchen at the back, a major bedroom upstairs, and then a small bedroom at the back. And that's the full size. And there are 11. So walk down the street and count the 11 ones. Now, E.G. Hughes's today is 2 and 1. Barney's is 2 and 1. Spinning Wheel, the other part of the Spinning Wheel there is 2 and 1. They've combined together to make it. Mulholland's and the 3 below the gateway are still more or less the same size as they were originally. But Mr. Lowy. Now, when you go to the other side of Main Street, you see all of the houses are totally different. They're all, first of all, they're all 3 stories high. Well, sorry, most of them are 3 stories high. But they're also either 2 bays wide, that's 2 rooms wide, or in some cases, 3 bays wide. They're much, much bigger sites. The reason on this side they're bigger sites is because each site was given out individually to people. It wasn't one man who came along and rented the whole thing. Every single site is a separate tenement. So the person who had a tenement built a house for themselves. And if you're going to build a house for yourself, you don't build a wee 1-room house. You build a 9-room house, or an 8-room house, whatever it is. You build as big a house as you can. So the houses on that side of the street are bigger than the houses on the other side of the street. This is a posher side of the street. And also, too, there were far more shops on this side of the street, here, than there are on the other side, because the little houses didn't allow you to be opening shops and that. And Mr. Lowy do it. Now, so this is Mr. Lowy's original lease, which he signed sometime in, what's the date on it there? Is it July 1824? And he signed the lease with, of course, Lord Blayney. And if you look slowly at the lease, now, it's very, very big property, this. The top side of it, sorry, here, from here to here is 169 feet long. And from here to the back of the fields down here runs 284 feet. It runs right back to the priest house at the back of all the houses in York Street. It runs the whole way to the priest's house. Now, Mr. Lowy leased the property that's in yellow. You see that bit? So he leases the land here behind the house. The houses were all built here in this narrow area, and all the houses were 29 foot wide. And he owns the piece down here, right up to the wall at the end here. The purple section was leased to the man who lived next door on the right, who was a man called Malloy. Charles Malloy originally, William Malloy, and then to those who would remember back to the 1960s in the town, Harry Malloy's, who had a shop where Coogan's shop was in the main street. And the Malloys owned that field, and it was known as Malloy's Meadow. Now we have a different name, and I'll just come to in a moment. So Malloy has that property, but Lowy has the rest of it, and has the 169 feet. Now you can see here a small gap. You see that? That small gap is beside Barney's chip shop. That's what we today call Skinner's Alley. And the reason why the little gap was there, A, it was so Mr. Lowy could get into his property, but there's also a path which led to this corner of the purple field, and Malloy then could get into his property through Skinner's Alley as well. And from Spence's chemist right down to below the Emerald Bar, there isn't a single alleyway. There isn't a single gateway except Skinner's Alley. In other words, all the people who lived in all these houses couldn't get into the back doors except they went down and up Skinner's Alley and came around the back and into the backs of their houses. And again, what Lowy is doing is he's using the properties that he's got to its maximum. He then had to re-sign the lease in the 1850s because, of course, the Hopes bought the estate from the Blayneys, and he now has to sign a lease with the Hopes. And this lease was signed sometime about 1855 approximately. And you can see again, the numbers are much clearer on it. This side here is 286 foot long. This side over here is 284 foot long, right? It's 164 foot long here from the edge of the spinning wheel down to Brendan Hughes's here. Skinner's Alley is still visible, and the little path to get into Malloy's Meadow. And it says here, this is a field leased to Charles Malloy. On the other side, there's a man called Blaney Greer, has that property, and McClellan's. And the man over here, John Lowy, has also got a property on this side, and he's got it at will. At will means on a day-to-day rent basis. He's not signing a lease on it. He has that property as well. And Lowy is the man responsible for that side of Main Street. Now, to people who know it will know, those who remember it anyway, these are the houses, the 11 houses. They're all along the front of the street here. Lowy owned this whole property behind the houses, and he owned like the L-shaped field that runs up this side. You see it? But the open field here is Malloy's Meadow, but of course we know it as Ward's Meadow. It's Ward's Meadow. And the amount of football, Elizabeth there was telling me that one day Cavan played Armagh in the Ulster Championship in there. Well, the children of the town, pretending to be Cavan and Armagh, would play football in there. A lot of street leagues games were played in there, and a lot of them ended in disputes and fights and everything else. The entry, of course, is through Skinner's Alley. And it remained a major play area for the children of the town, for donkey shearers, to go down to Ward's Meadow. And not only that, in 1952, when St Mary's Church was being extended, there was a street league of adult street league in which Main Street and Muckler Street and the Lane and all had a wee team to raise money for the chapel. And a lot of the games were played in Ward's Meadow, and I assume there was a lot of shouting and arguments over Ward's Meadow. Eventually, when the railway was built, which is on the extreme left of the photograph, a corner of the field was cut off so the railway could make its way through. And here we see the priest house, and you see here the wall at the end of Ward's Meadow comes to the edge of the priest's property. Okay. Now, all of the houses, most of the houses anyway, in York Street have their back gardens going back as far as the meadow, but none of them go beyond it. York Street is built in such a way that it doesn't encroach on Ward's Meadow. And that's why the town, this side of the town, which I'm going to concentrate on for the first half here today, this end of the town, Ward's Meadow, is a dominant feature, and the small houses is a second feature.